very effective for bringing your mind back and focusing it on Krishna. Well, tonight we are celebrating the is it Disappearance? No, the Vyas Puja of Tamal Krsna Goswami, who was a very intimate disciple of His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, the founder of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, or this movement that we're all part of. Also, it is, we also remember today Gorkishore Babaji, one of the main gurus in the disciplic succession. And so I thought that I would present an aspect of Tamal Krsna Maharaj, which we don't usually hear about that much, and that is his scholarly work. He was getting a PhD in Vaishnava theology, and he wrote a lot of things on the path of getting his PhD, and this is one of the books. It's called The Living Theology of Krishna Bhakti. Why did he try and get a PhD? Because he wanted to establish the bona fide work of Srila Prabhupada, his guru, with the scholarly community in the world. So he wanted to become a PhD scholar and present to other scholars the exceptional work that Srila Prabhupada did by spreading Krishna consciousness. So I'm going to read and just comment on one small part of this book, which is called The Living Theology of Krishna Bhakti. In other words, he's making the point that Krishna consciousness is still alive, although it's the oldest spiritual, let's say, teaching in the history of the world. The Bhagavad Gita dates over 5,000 years ago. That's long before any other scriptures that are read today. Much longer history than other scriptures. The Bible at most is like 3,000 years, 3,500 years. The Quran is only about 1,600 years, and the Buddhist writings about 2,500 years. So we see how Bhagavad Gita predates all of those. And actually it's even longer than that. It goes back to at least 130 million years ago when it was spoken to the sun god, but by Krishna. But in most recent times, 5,000 years ago, it was spoken again. So Tamal Krsna Maharaj, he writes an article called Sources of Knowledge, or pramana. Pramana means evidences, how you can determine if something is true or false. And in that, he makes it very clear that Bhaktivinoda Thakur was a revolutionary. His mission was that he was very dissatisfied with the present state of Vaishnavism in India, and he wanted to purify it from the deviations that had sprung up after the disappearance of Lord Chaitanya 500 years ago. Lord Chaitanya came as a dynamic revolutionary, making Krishna consciousness very simple, because this age that we're living in, called Kali Yuga, is very, very difficult to maintain spiritual life. And therefore, Lord Chaitanya came and made it very simple to attain liberation from the cycle of birth and death, simply by chanting the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, regularly hearing Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam, taking prasadam on a daily basis, and changing one's lifestyle to taking rest early, waking up early, and in the Brahma Muhurta period, at least 3 hours before sunrise, and practicing intense spiritual meditation and service in those early morning hours when there's no, let's say, no obstacles to full consciousness. And then the rest of the day remembering Krishna by working honestly and using a significant amount of one's salary in the service of Krishna. So he says, indeed, the word revolution derives from the sense of circular motion, hence the return of a period of time. The late 19th century notion that knowledgeable Hindus had more to learn about spirituality from their own spiritual masters than from the West was reaffirmed by the choice of the illiterate, emotional, ecstatic Gorkishore Das Babaji, who was born around 1830 and died in 1915, as the guru of the learned Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. So Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur was one of the most brilliant intellectuals during this early period of the 20th century. And he was recognized as one of the most brilliant men in the world at that time. But he accepted Gorkishore Babaji, who was illiterate. He couldn't read or write. And he accepted him as his guru. Now, why is that? Because, first of all, his father, Bhaktivinoda Thakur, insisted that he accept Gorkishore Babaji. And secondly, because Gorkishore Babaji had he was in a transcendental position of constant contemplation of Lord Krishna and Krishna's pastimes. So you don't have to. Okay, that's all right. You don't have to be literate to do that. You have to be pure. And Gorkishore Babaji was very renounced, and he was a pure devotee of the Lord. So the goal of life is to be able to fix one's mind always on Krishna and engage one's activities in Krishna's service. Well, that was a description of Gorkishore Babaji. His mind was fixed always on Krishna, and he was always engaged in the service of the Lord. So this has nothing to do with intellectual erudition or intellectualism. It has to do with purity of purpose. So this was something that Bhaktivinoda Thakur realized would be beneficial for his son if he was going to become a viable and significant preacher of Krishna consciousness. It's not only knowing the Shastras, but also having absolute contemplation of the Lord day and night, and dedicate one's activities completely to pleasing one's guru and Krishna. So Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur accepted Gorkishore Babaji and underwent extreme tapasya, or voluntary acts of austerity, and he chanted I think it was 100 million names of Krishna. It took him about 4 years to do that. And during that time, he lived very, very simply and very austerely. So now, His Holiness Tamal Krsna Maharaj writes, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati did not undergo Western acculturation and the consequent tensions between traditional faith and modern critical thought that marked Bhaktivinoda's early life. His father's increasing Vaishnava orthodoxy precluded that eventuality. Instead, we find him by his father's side evangelizing, meaning preaching, pilgrimaging, proofreading, and eidetic youth vowing lifetime celibacy, known already as Siddhanta Saraswati for his mastery of Sanskrit, mathematics, and astrology. So you can see what Tamal Krsna Maharaj is doing. He is putting the focus on these revolutionary, pure devotees, and focusing on Bhaktivinoda Thakur, and then Gorkishore Babaji, and then especially Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, who created the foundation by which Srila Prabhupada could spread this movement all over the world. So, Bhaktivinoda Thakur trained his son to be a world preacher, not just a scholar, but a preacher, a person who can actually convince others to become pure devotees and to take up spiritual life. So he says, absent are those tempering circumstances of a Christian education. Badraloic socialization and government service that might have constrained his revolutionary spirit. So Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he was a member of the British, let's say, bureaucracy, and he had the highest position an Indian could attain. But he didn't want his son to go that way. He wanted his son to be completely dedicated to devotional service and spreading Krishna consciousness and making it a worldwide, opening it up to the whole world. So he says, and government service that might have constrained his revolutionary spirit, which was as much his nature as a sign of the changing times. If the father's modality often tended toward an accommodating pluralism and theological ingenuity, the son's selective inclusivism and institutional expansion moved more in the direction of an exclusive triumphalism. In other words, he's using a lot of big words here because he's a scholar, but I mean, Tamal Krsna Maharaj became an intellectual and scholar, but he's saying that basically Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur was focusing on pure devotional service, not compromising in any way with, and then we'll understand what that means in a second. In fact, the difference in tenor is an indication of their callings. For Bhakti Vinoda, the recovery of a tradition; for Bhakti Siddhanta, its consolidation and expansion. So Bhakti Vinoda Thakur, he's saying, had to rescue Vaishnavism from the false followers of it that had made a mockery of it in India, and because of their selfish desires, because of their violation of fundamental principles, and because of their deviation. So he had to reestablish the foundations of pure devotional service, or bhakti. But now, when he did that, then his son could function within pure devotional service and not make any compromises at all. And so he said, now, Tamal Krsna Maharaj says, here we may do well to rejoin our Prabhupada. Well, he's talking now about Srila Bhakti Vedanta Swami, Srila Prabhupada. To learn exactly what it was that impressed him most about his guru, he quickly found out just how uncompromising and challenging Bhakti Siddhanta could be. As a skeptical young Gandhian, he's talking about Bhaktivedanta Swami now, Srila Prabhupada, and a married manager of a pharmaceutical laboratory, he had to be dragged to their first meeting in 1922 when he first met Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. So disillusioned was he with the usual holy men his father entertained, only to hear the Guru deprecate his national sympathies and in their stead recommend that as an English speaker he go to foreign countries to preach the gospel of Chaitanya. So Prabhupada was a follower of Gandhi at that time in 1922. He was married and he had his one child at least at that time, and he was a manager of a pharmaceutical company. And Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati just turned him upside down in 1 minute, and basically said that he was wasting his time following Gandhi, and that he, because he was well educated, he could speak English, he should spend the rest of his life preaching Krishna consciousness in the English-speaking world. This is an amazing thing to tell him in the first 30 seconds or a minute or a couple minutes of their discussion, right? And Prabhupada was, Vedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada was completely taken aback by the daring and revolutionary, and uncompromising words of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. Certain themes his guru emphasized repeatedly surface in Prabhupada's remembrances, merge with Prabhupada's character, and get projected into his own activities. Above all, the subversive image of the revolutionary again comes to mind, Bhaktisiddhanta at war with Maya, or illusion. So what is Prabhupada's second pranam prayer? It says that his purpose in life is to challenge and defeat impersonalism in the Western countries. And that is specifically the Mayavadi impersonalism and the Buddhist impersonalism. Battle occurs on many fronts with the following targets in the line of Bhaktisiddhanta's direct fire. So, because Bhaktisiddhanta did not compromise and was definitely challenging and revealing the sophistry or the false pretensions of most Indian gurus and Indian sannyasis and so forth at that time, he became a target for their anger and even their violence that they were going to use to try and eliminate him, because he became a threat to their business. Battle occurs on many fronts with the following targets in the line of Bhaktisiddhanta's direct fire: the Smarta Brahmins and caste Goswamis, for insisting that birth alone makes them, not the Vaishnavas, qualified as priests and acharyas. So this is one problem that's still existing, and that is that one becomes qualified simply by birth, not by qualification, but simply by birth. So this was very, very prevalent in the time of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, that the Brahmins, even though they were not qualified, just by the fact that they were born in a Brahmin family, made them so-called priests. And this was a mockery. And the same thing is still going on today. And then the Smarta Brahmins and caste Goswamis, who claim that you cannot be a Brahmin unless you're born in a particular Brahminical family. And they insist that birth alone makes them qualified as priests and acharyas. And then the Mayavadis, for considering as Maya the Lord's form. I mean, the Mayavadis claim that when Krishna appears in the material world, he appears in a material body. They also claim that there is no Vaikuntha and no Goloka, and that the ultimate stage of realization, of spiritual realization, is the impersonal Brahman effulgence. and in order to merge and they also claim that the material world is not real also. And they only say that this merging into the light, the Brahman effulgence, is the highest stage of spirituality. And that's all false. Every one of those statements that they make is false. And it misleads people, and it leads to basically rampant materialism and in the impersonalization of the goal of life makes people basically atheists. So then he says, and then the Bhagavata reciters and temple priests who use the sacred Vedic, let's say, teaching for business and are said to have less dignity than an honest street sweeper. So this is another whole branch of people that Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati is challenging and revealing that their sophistry, their false teachings, their false premises. And these were the professional reciters of the Srimad Bhagavatam and temple priests who were basically businessmen doing rituals only to earn money to maintain their families. And then he says, and then the Sahajas for being devotional imitators. So the Sahajas, there are 13 different groups of them in Bengal, and they pretend to be in states of samadhi, and they swoon, and they chant, very ecstatically, and then they faint in ecstasy and things like that. And they put on a big show. It's a very interesting show, but it's completely phony. And then so all these different anomalies, deviants from pure devotional service were existing, and it was the height of their cheating. And this is what Bhaktivinoda Thakur and Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur were trying to reveal to the public all this cheating, and then establish a movement of pure devotees who maintain the purity of Vaishnava traditions and bring back the original practice of Krishna consciousness. And then also the babajis, famed for their renunciation, for secretly but coveting worldly pleasures. So the babaji classes of men seem to be very, very renounced, but actually they would have girlfriends, they would smoke ganja also. And so all these things were going on. If to this list are added all false gurus, yogis, avatars, and all other followers, together they constitute a society of cheaters and the cheated. Little wonder that Bhaktisiddhanta was so feared, even hated. Yeah, there was also attempts to kill him by these so-called saintly persons. Right? Also, there's a footnote where Tamal Krsna Maharaj quotes Srila Prabhupada, who says, "I was only with my Guru Maharaj 4 or 5 times." Then later, Prabhupada says, no more than 10 times. So Prabhupada's association with his Guru was not very significant. It was different than, because he was married, he had children, he had a business, and he was not considered a prominent member of the Gaudiya Math or his Guru's movement. But he was recognized as being a good preacher and somewhat of a scholar of Vedic knowledge. That's why he received the name Bhaktivedanta. It means that he has understood the goal of all Vedic knowledge. Right? And then it says, so when the freedom fighter Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose, a former classmate of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur and a secretary of Urquhart's Philosophy Club, asked Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati not to thwart the nationalist movement. Bhaktisiddhanta invoked the colonialist metaphor of the effeminate Bengali as an apolitical dodge. According to Prabhupada, Bose was told, "For your national propaganda, you require very strong men. But these people who have joined my movement, they are very weak. You can see they're somewhat thin. They're very skinny. So don't put your glance upon them. Let them eat something and chant Hare Krishna." So you see how Tamal Krsna Maharaj is collecting all this antidotes and just to show the revolutionary, let's say, tenor or attitude of Bhaktisiddhanta to purify, or to basically neutralize all these phony people that are making a mockery of Vaishnavism, and establish a movement of genuine, pure devotees. At the heart of this severe critique is Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur's concern to stabilize the tradition by cementing its boundaries against proliferative heteropraxis. In other words, to purify all the false teaching and all the false behaviors. Each condemnation is an instance of defining Vaishnava orthodoxy as he and his predecessors understand it. His predecessors are the 6 Goswamis and other great acharyas. Each censure treats of a substantive issue, which, had he not responded as he did, would have radically changed the direction of the movement. A specific example should elucidate the matter in 2 ways. His criticism of the very popular Radha Raman Charan Das for suppressing the audible chanting of Hare Krishna with his own rhyming kirtan, and his criticism of the same Radha Raman for addressing one of his followers as Radha's friend Lalita. Against these delimiting moves, Bhaktisiddhanta's indictment of an inclusory caste-based status quo paves the way for Prabhupada's global mission, the sort of universal religion anticipated in the Bhagavata. Vaishnava Bhakti affords one Brahminical status automatically, perfection potentially in one lifetime. So, in other words, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur wanted to go back to the original understanding of Vaishnava practice. That is, that a person in one lifetime can go back to Godhead. And anyone can be elevated to the position of a pure devotee. It doesn't matter what their caste is. It doesn't matter what their education is. What matters is their purity and absolute engagement in devotional service with no material motive, and living a simple life, simple living, high thinking, not being enamored by Western science and technology and money. Okay. So, and this person that Bhaktisiddhanta sort of put his attention to show his sophistry, his name is Radha Raman Charan Das. Well, he's the one that came up with a rhyming, let's say, mantra called Bhajanita Ego Radhe Sham Japa Hare Krishna Hare Ram. So he wanted to replace. When I went to Jagannatha Puri for the first time, I entered the temple where they were chanting this, and I thought, oh wow, that sounds really poetic. And it sounds nice, you know. And later on, the devotees told me, listen, that's complete nonsense. And yeah, it is nonsense. He made something up, even though there's some names of Krishna in there, which is beneficial for saying, but the whole idea is a deviation from pure devotional service. Okay, so preaching is focused in large cities with the emphasis not on reclusive bhajan or seeing God, but on working in such a way that God will see you. So this was what Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati did. And he was criticized for it. He said, you know, pure Vaishnavas don't live in opulent temples in big cities. They live a very, very, very restricted life in the countryside, in a pristine countryside. But no, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati built temples in cities because that's where the people are contaminated. And that's where the mass of people are. In the spirit of yukta vairagya, balanced renunciation, the true follower of Rupa Goswami, a Rupanaga Vaishnava, does not live under a tree dressed only in a loincloth. Everything, palatial buildings, automobiles, radios, and especially printing presses, the Brihat Mridanga or the big drum, as well as mixing with kings and politicians and preaching overseas, should be utilized to please Krishna, hence must not be renounced. So that was Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur's ethos, his whole purpose, and his way of, his methodology of dynamic preaching in big cities and using anything that is useful to getting the attention of the people and to transmit his message of pure devotion. In place of the looser knit, far-flung congregation of his father, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati established the Gaudiya Math, eventually a well-ordered missionary army of brahmacharyans, celibate students, based in 64 temple ashrams and led by 18 sannyasin disciples with himself as its head. Jai Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Jai Shri Radha Nilamadhava ki jai. He established 4 presses from which he re-edited and published his father's huge literary corpus, matched by his own equally large output, a Bengali daily newspaper, and fortnightly journals in Bengali, Oriya, Assamese, Hindi, and English. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur had only slight, though meaningful, opportunities to actively participate in his broad mission. Srila Prabhupada or Bhaktivedanta Swami had only slight, though meaningful, opportunities to actively participate in this broad mission during Bhaktisiddhanta's lifetime. So in other words, Prabhupada was not heavily engaged in the Gaudiya Math. He was engaged, but not intensely, because he had his business, he had his 5 children, he had his wife, and but he tried as much as he could to help the Gaudiya Math. He helped raise funds to establish the temples in Allahabad and Bombay, and occasionally contributed to the Harmonist, the English Fortnightly. But his time would come. And Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur said about Prabhupada, we may note a verse Prabhupada penned that caught his guru's attention, apparently for so aptly encapsulating the mission of the Gaudiya Math. Thereafter, Bhaktisiddhanta ordered the Harmonist editor to publish whatever Bhaktivedanta Swami wrote. Absolute is sentient, thou hast proved. Impersonal calamity, thou hast moved. So, in other words, Prabhupada wrote this poem as an offering to his guru. I think it was in 1933 or 34. And after that, anything he wrote was printed in the journal of the Gaudiya Math, the Harmonist. And sometimes devotees would say, remarks, that Prabhupada, he didn't have much time for the Gaudiya Math. But Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur rebuked them, and he said, he will do everything when there is need. And Bhaktisiddhanta reportedly told Prabhupada's sannyasi godbrothers, when they recommended he assume the presidency of the Bombay Center. So Bhaktivedanta Swami was keenly aware that his family duties prevented him from serving his guru like the brahmacharis and sannyasi disciples. In what was to be their final exchange, he inquired how he might best serve his guru, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. And Bhaktisiddhanta replied, I am fully confident that you can explain in English our thoughts and arguments to the people who are not conversant with the languages of other members. This will do much good to yourself as well as your audience. I have every hope that you can turn yourself into a very good English preacher if you serve the mission to inculcate the novel impression to the people in general and philosophers of so-called modern age and religiosity. Prabhupada, or Bhaktivedanta Swami, immediately recognized this to be the same instruction he had received at their first meeting. Referring to this letter as the order that defined his mission, he comments, we should take up the words from the spiritual master as our life and soul. We should try to carry out the instruction, the specific instruction of the spiritual master, very rigidly, without caring for our personal benefit or loss. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. So this is a very interesting book written by Tamal Krsna Goswami. And this was a paper that he wrote toward his PhD. And there's a book about it, collecting all these different essays that he had to write. But it's very interesting because he's trying to establish the dynamic and very elevated, pure philosophy of Krishna consciousness that other scholars should look at very seriously. So he's writing on their level, So this was the, let's say, what Tamal Krsna Maharaj was striving for, to get his PhD and then present to the scholarly PhDs and in the world the validity and bona fides of Srila Prabhupada and the Vaishnava Acharyas. And it was a big, big thing that he was doing. Unfortunately, he left his body before he got his PhD. And but we have a lot of things that he wrote at that time. And if you want to know more about Tamal Krsna Maharaj, you should read these books that he's written in his, let's say, his academic period. And it shows how much he loved Srila Prabhupada, because he wanted to present to the big scholars of the world Srila Prabhupada and what he achieved and the purity of his teaching that spread all over the world. Hare Krishna. Any questions? So what he's done basically is explaining to the scholars how Prabhupada was able to spread this movement all over the world, which is an amazing thing that he did. And little by little, people are recognizing that what Prabhupada did, no one else, not Ramakrishna, not Vivekananda, not Paramahansa, so-and-so, even come close to what Prabhupada has done. But behind him is Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, Gorkishore Babaji, Bhaktivinoda Thakur, Narottam Das Thakur, all these great personalities, and the 6 Goswamis, and of course Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Okay, all glories to Srila Prabhupada, all glories to Tamal Krsna Goswami Maharaj. Haribol. Okay, so now we will have the Pushpanjali and Guru Puja.
Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada.
Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya
Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada. Shri Guru Charana Padma Kevala Bhakti Sadma. Bandhamohi Shabadana Mate Bandhamohi Shabadana Mate Jahar prasade bai evavato riyajai. Jahar prasade bai evavato riyajai. Krishna prapti hoy jaha hoite Krishna prapti hoy jaga hoite Gurur mukha padma vaika chitte ko riyaika Gurur mukha padma vaika chitte ko riyaika Aranaka priya mane asha Airana kariya mane asha Shri Guru Charane rati eisheo tamagati শ্রী গুরু চরণে রতি এই শ্রেয় তমাগতি যে প্রসাদে পুরে সর্ব আশা যে প্রসাদে পুরে সর্ব আশা चक्षुदान दिल जय जन्मे जन्मे प्रभु से चक्षुदान दिल जय जन्मे जन्मे प्रभु से दिव्य ज्ञान दे प्रकाशित दिव्य ज्ञान दे प्रकाशित प्रेम भक्ति जाइते अविद्या विनाश जाइते प्रेम भक्ति जाइते अविद्या विनाश जाइते वेदे गाय जहार चरित्र वेदे गाय जहार चरित्र गुरु करुणा सिंधु आदम जनार बंधु श्री गुरु करुणा सिंधु आदम जनार बंधु लोकनाथ लोकर जीवन लोकनाथ लोकर जीवन आहा प्रभु कर दया दे हमारे पद छाया आहा प्रभु कर दया दे हमारे पद छाया जय कुश त्रिभुवन हे जय कुश त्रिभुवन जय प्रभुपाद 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 जय प्रभुपाद जय जय प्रभुपाद 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 जय जय प्रभुपाद नमो विष्णुपदाय कृष्ण प्रसाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्ति वेदांत स्वामी नित्य नामिने नमस्ते सरस्वती देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी प्रशांत देशतारिणे श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवासादि Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna. Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna. Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Prabhupada. Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada. Nitai Gaura Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol. Nitai Gaura Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol.
Shri Radha Krishna Gopinath Sam Kund Radha Kund Giri Govardhan Ki Jai, Shri Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai, Shri Mayapura Dham Ki Jai, Shri Jagannath Puri Dham Ki Jai, Tulasi Devi Ki Jai, Bhakti Devi Ki Jai, Ganga Maya Ki Jai, Jamuna Maya Ki Jai, Samaveda Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai, His Holiness Tamal Krsna Goswami Maharaja Ki Jai, Gaur Kishore Das Babaji Ki Jai, Gaur Premanandi. All glories to assembled devotees, all glories to assembled devotees, all glories to assembled devotees, all glories to Shri Guru and Shri Guranga, all glories to Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai.
Recite the standard Pushpanjali prayers. Om Ajnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Mena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam yena bhutale Swayam Rupa kada mayyam Dadati swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Guru Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitamscha Namaum Vishnupadaya Krishna Pristhaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pashyata Deshatarine Namaum Vishnupadaya Krishna Pristhaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Iti Namine Shri Vrishabhanuvi Devi Daite Kripabdaye Krishna Sambandha Vijnana Daine Prabhave Namaha Madhurujjvala Premagya श्रीरूपानुदभक्तिदा श्रीगौरकरुणाशक्ति विग्रहाय नमोस्तुते। नमस्ते गौरवाणी श्रीमूर्तये दीनतारिणे रूपानुग विदुराप अपसिद्धान्तदन्तहारिणे नमो गौरकिशोराय साक्षाद्वैराग्यमूर्तये विप्रलम्बरसाम्बोधे पादाम्बोजाय ते नमः। नमो भक्तिविनोदाय सच्चिदानन्दनामिने गौरशक्तिस्वरूपाय रूपानुगवराय ते गौरवीर्भावभूमेस्त्वं निर्देस्त्वसज्जनप्रिय वैष्णवा सर्वभौमाश्री जगन्नाथाय ते नमः। वाञ्छाकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपासिन्धुभ्य एव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। नमो महावदन्याय कृष्णाप्रेमप्रदायते कृष्णाय कृष्णचैतन्य नाम्ने गौरतस्वे नमः। पञ्चतत्त्वात्मकं कृष्णं भक्तरूपस्वरूपकं भक्तावतारं भक्ताख्यं नमामि भक्तशक्तिकं। हे कृष्णा करुणा सिंधु दीनबंधु जगत्पते गोपेशा गोपिका कांता राधा कांता नमोस्तुते। जयतां सुरतार्पंगो मम मंदिर्मतेर्गति मत्सर्वस्य पदाम्बोजो राधा मदन मोहनो दिव्यद्वृन्दारण्य कल्पद्रुमादः श्रीमद्रत्नागार सिंहासनस्थितो श्रीमद्राधा श्रीलगोविन्ददेवो प्रेष्ठालिभिः सेव्यमानो स्वरामि श्रीमान् रासरसारम्भी वंशीवटतटस्थितः कर्षन्वेणुर्स्वनैर्गोपैः गोपीनाथाय श्रीस्तु नः। तप्तकाञ्चन गौरांगी राधे वृन्दावनेश्वरी वृषभानुसुते देवी प्रणमामि हरिप्रिये। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्त वृंद। हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे। Now we'll recite the pranam mantra for Srila Jagannath Das Babaji. Shri Gaur Bhava Bhumestvam Nirdeshtva Sajjana Priya Vaishnava Sarvabhauma Shri Shri Jagannathaya Te Namaha. Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Pristhaya Bhutale श्रीमती तमाल कृष्ण गोस्वामी स्वामिनिति नामिने एष पुष्पांजलि स्वाहा। Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Hare Ram. Shri Gaur Bhav Bhumestvam Nirdestva Sajjana Priyah Vaishnava Sarvabhauma Shri Jagannatha Te Namaha Namaum Vishnupadaya Krishna Pristhaya Bhutale Srimati Tamal Krsna Swami Niti Namine Esha Pushpanjali Swaha Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare. Gauravirbhava bhumestvam Nirdestva Sajjana Priyah Vaishnava Sarvabhauma Shri Jagannatha Te Namaha Namaum Vishnupadaya Krishna Pristhaya Bhutale Srimati Tamal Krsna Goswami Iti Namine Esha Pushpanjali Swaha.
Hare Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Ram, Ram, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Ram, Hare Hare Ram, Ram, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram, Hare Krishna. HH Tamal Krsna Goswami Maharaja ki jai. Thank you for coming tonight. And now we'll go on to the next part of the program, which is Mahaprasad. Haribol, Haribol, Haribol. This is why Krishna consciousness is so nice, because always accompanied by Mahaprasadam. You cannot have a successful festival without Mahaprasadam. Haribol. All glories to Prabhupada. And today, finally, the Auburn farm is sold. I'll let our esteemed Srinivas Prabhu please come and tell us a few words about what you accomplished, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. I did not accomplish anything. You are the one who did everything. So I always say, whatever Maharaj touches, it becomes golden, both in quality and quantity. So, and he's already mining gold in Arlington. Very soon that will become diamond. So yeah, I'm happy to share that today we successfully closed on selling the Auburn farm. Revolve. So when I was in India, one day Maharaj called and he said, Prabhu, we need to list Auburn home. And then I said, Maharaj, this is winter time. It's very dull time. It's not a good time to sell the property. Let's wait until February or March. But Maharaj said, no, let's give it a try. It may not be the best option that we have, but let's give it a try. Because Maharaj was in a hurry to, sell that farm and use the funds for Bellevue project. So he insisted on listing the home right away. Then while I was in India itself, I arranged everything and we listed it. And Maharaj blessings, Srila Prabhupada's blessings, and Radha Nila Madhav's mercy. We got an offer the very next day from a very nice family, and for the full price, whatever Maharaj wanted, and it was a very smooth closing until last week. And there were some hurdles. The King County, there is a very famous and powerful lady in King County. She created some problems, and Maharaj, had dealt with that experience several times in the past. So based on that experience, under the expert guidance of Maharaj, so we resolved that issue very, very easily and smoothly. And we thought it would drag on for several days, and the closing might be delayed. But we were, the King County lady, she was about to charge us 25,000, for not, she was saying we are not maintaining the farmland there, and she was even saying we are not non-profit. So then Maharaj wrote a nice, response to that question, and then today, it resolved miraculously. Yeah, when we spoke with her, she said, I know you're all very compliant, but I didn't want to have any bad karma. She used these words actually. Her name is Deborah Clark. So she's going to retire in January. She said, before I retire, I don't want to carry any bad karma. Yeah. So, Yeah, I mean that project, Auburn project, it worked out very nicely. We bought that in 2018, and now we walked out of it with nice profits that we can use for Bellevue project. So that's how Maharaj, continues and expands, Seattle Yatra, that, as if there is no end, Maharaj desire is to have 50,000 devotees, but I don't see an end to it, The 50,000 is like short-term goal, but long term, there's no limit. So it keeps going. Yeah. Hare Krishna. Thank you, everyone. Oh yeah, another short, experience. While Kirtan was going on, usually Maharaj does not go near, the donations that are kept there. Have you ever seen Maharaj going near those? No, right? But today, Maharaj was just walking around and he put his hand and took out some money. So wherever there is Maharaj, there is Lakshmi and there is Narayana.
I can smell it.
Wherever there is Maharaj, there is Lakshmi and Narayana, Radha and Krishna. Oh, more Lakshmi is come. Okay, our dear Damodar Prasad Prabhu and family donating $1,100. Oh, Shashi. Okay.
That's why 1,100.
Yeah. Yeah, $1,000 from Damodar Prasad Prabhu and $100 Shashin.
Thank you very much, Prabhu. Thank you. Oh, and we purchased the juice mobile, and it's going to be brought here in a royal fashion by somebody you all know. His name is Jagannatha Prabhu. He's going to fly to Indiana and bring it here. Then drive it here. Yeah. To save $1,000. Wow. Every cent, every penny counts. Yeah. So let's take prasadam now. And we should all congratulate Rasavati Mataji for cooking the prasadam for her dear Guru Dev. Hari Bol.